So we'll do roll call.
The time is 9:35. This is the winter 2017 meeting of the Access Advisory Committee. Time is 9:35. Roll call.
So we have Bob
Here.
Burnham,
Here.
Barbara Silver,
Here.
Jim Marston,
Here.
Nick Coons.
Here.
Aaron Johnson is absent. Martha DeGasis is absent. Ken McKellen. Oh.
Here.
All right, and just also we have Alelia Parenteau here, Mike Wiltshire, who is going to be the new ADA coordinator, is over here. Jim moved to a new division in the city, and so has moved on from this role. And Mike is acting currently, but will potentially stay in this role. And we have Tina Diaz here, who's going to be our note taker.
Welcome.
Just Bob, for your benefit, Jason Dominguez is not here currently.
Okay.
We also have no members of the public, so
So far, okay.
20 minutes of our agenda is going to get skipped over here with public comment unless someone as you would like to
Okay.
set up speakers.
I'd like to recognize anyone else in the room.
So we also have Justin Van Mullen from Parks and Rec. They're going to talk to us about Cabrillo Pavilion today.
Okay.
We have Laurie Inez, who's going to give us the engineering update, and
Joe Wilcox, KBZ Architects.
Joe Wilcox from KBZ Architects,
Joe.
Hi.
who's also working on
Welcome.
Cabrillo.
Exactly, that's why I'm here.
Okay. Is that it?
That's it.
Okay.
I think the weather is probably keeping quite a few people.
I would like to officially welcome Nick Coons as our newest committee member to the Access Advisory Committee. Congratulations on your appointment. Welcome to joining us. You've segued very nicely from all your input and public comment to being an official member of this committee, and I'm glad to have you here with us. And also, Mike, welcome, official welcome from the chair.
Thank you.
You have a lot to cover. I guess our next item would be approval of the minutes from November 11th, 2016, and discussion of pending items. Let's see. I'm not sure how much to include here. I took several notes. There was a lot of discussion on the ADA parking issue with oversized vehicles and all that. Now, one item I noticed, it said action. Staff will post a compliant PDF version of the flyer on the city's website for the visually impaired. Has that been done?
We're still working on that. I'm working with our IT staff,
Okay,
so once it's completed, I could get with you and let you know.
okay, okay.
I have a side question. Does this room have Wi-Fi connectivity so that I can bring in my iPad and see the site?
It
It does.
Okay.
Good, good. Okay. Let's see. There's a lot of, Tina, you took very copious notes in these minutes. Thank you. I'm just not sure what, I have a lot of questions. I'm not sure if I should ask them now or wait till the actual agenda item comes up. What is the committee's wish?
Bring out anyway, and we decide when to discuss it, but that's really good to know.
Okay, I know Jim Marston requested a map of all blue curb parking in the city. That was mentioned.
So we do have that as a handout
map?
here, and let's just go over that really quickly. And Bob, what we'll do for you is we'll post, I attached to the map a list of the street addresses of each of the locations.
Okay.
So we'll post that for you. That's the only way I can think of to make this compliant for you. So yeah, this map we only captured the downtown corridor and the spots that are in here. There were a couple outliers in the Montecito area and way up north, but I thought our focus was mostly here.
How many are there?
You can see on the other sheet.
I could
believe
see.
there's 54.
Okay.
I might be guessing a little bit there, but we could count the list on the back.
I saw there were a bunch, but I couldn't really tell how many.
Now, I would like to address that later, but this is not the time, it's just out about the minutes, right? But is someone going to present this map, or is this?
No, we were just asked to bring a map forward, so that's what
Okay.
we did. But we do have a representative from downtown parking and transportation planning coming to talk to us in a little bit.
Oh, good, okay.
Okay.
Shall we save
I
the
can
discussion
wait
for
for
that
Yes.
presentation then? Okay. Okay, let me see, there was, so that's what you were talking about, staff will contact Transportation Planning Department to see if such a map is available. Okay, that was done. Something about, Jim Dewey suggested that we start a 10-minute conversation, getting the conversation started around the committee's practical experience around town. This will be revisited in the next committee meeting, is what it says here, and the discussion should be framed around the following two questions. Where is more accessible parking needed, and where are the gaps?
Correct.
So
that can be part of our
that'll
ADA.
be part of that
purview.
discussion? Okay. And then there, down on item 10, it talked about, there's a brief discussion of our goals list. And my only concern is that this we keep kicking the can down the road. We tabled it to this meeting because we ran out of time, and now maybe we have time without the public comment. Maybe we have time to include about, we agreed, I know that you called me and I agreed to table it to the following meeting, not realizing we'd already tabled it to this meeting. So my bad on that, but I do want to really prioritize this item as an agenda item to really tackle this goals list. About 3 or 4 particulars that we need to tackle and follow through on.
So we completely agree. The issue is twofold. One is we had some projects that needed kind of immediate attention, and we had an action list that was longer than we had time for. Unfortunately, we cannot discuss it at this meeting because it was not agendized.
Right.
So we will agendize it, guaranteed, for next meeting.
Good.
The other issue was that we have a new ADA coordinator, and so it wasn't really fair to bring back the results of your conversation with Jim Dewey when he's no longer representing the group. So we wanted to give the group a chance to discuss with Mike Wiltshire the goals and objectives and bring them back again with a renewed focus.
And there were some items under item number 11.
Can I make a suggestion?
Go ahead, Jim.
Jim Dewey was going to meet with Bob before this
They
meeting.
did.
We did. We did have a meeting.
Oh, recently?
Martha and Karen and
Not
I,
at that meeting, but you said he was going to give you some input on a couple of sticky points. And I thought maybe you want to meet with Mike before the next meeting to get his input.
sure.
Yeah, I think that's our goal, is to bring that ad hoc committee back with Mike
Okay.
to discuss the long list of goals and objectives and talk about which ones we can accommodate, which ones are up for discussion, and which ones we cannot accommodate.
Okay.
And my last thing, this is under the minutes now, is item 11. We discussed several things that Karen brought up, about 3 points. Barbara brought up the point about disabled spaces available in a parking lot that's full. So will this be also part of the discussion, under the ADA discussion?
No, we could bring it up to the staff and see if they have any input. I mean, that's a little bit of a challenge for us. We do our best to accommodate ADA spots in parking garages, and if there's a line because the garage is full, there's not a whole lot we can do in anticipation of that. And that was,
Okay.
Barbara, that was your point, right?
Yes,
There was a line
yes,
to
and
make-
so my question is there some other way to access these buildings or get out of these buildings? When I started to think about, is there an alternate way of getting in, then I began to think, well, is there no other way of getting out if there's an emergency?
Right.
So I thought there's probably some other way of getting in. We just are not aware of it.
So let me have Victor Garza come back. He was who spoke with us last meeting, the parking superintendent, and we can voice this concern. I can't recall if he was still in the room when you brought that up.
He was surprised.
Yeah. So let me chat with him, see if he'll come back and talk to us. And
I just know that sometimes there are emergency exits or entrances that if people know they're there or how to access them, that might be possible within this community that has placards.
Right. I mean, without going too far into this subject matter, each
yes.
of the garages has a set amount of entrances and exits, and so I'm not sure, but we
Right,
can
it was that they
certainly
had
talk
this
to-
set amount of handicap parking places that they'd moved into the parking garages from the street, but they're not accessible when there's a line.
Right. So let's bring that back.
Okay,
That'll be another-
thank you very much.
Before we vote the final approval of the minutes, does anyone else on the committee have input?
Well, I would like to ask Tina if there's any way we can get at least a draft of the minutes soon after the meeting. You've asked before. I'm on one committee that actually they sent it out the night of our meeting. But for us to look at minutes and think of what happened 3 months ago is pretty impossible. So is there any way that you can transcribe these things within a week or two even and get out at least a draft copy to us so we can look at it? Is that possible to do?
Even a draft would help,
Okay.
be helpful. That way we could give you input before the final copy comes out.
Yeah, that sounds good. We'll go
We would
ahead.
appreciate that, and it helps.
Yeah.
And the older you get, but 3 months is a long time to remember anything, you know. But, okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other comments?
It's too long, yeah.
What's that?
Ken says
Ken?
it's too long.
Yes, too long a wait?
Yeah.
Is that what you mean?
Yes.
Thanks, Ken. Yeah, I think we agree. My only concern, with wrapping this up before we vote, is that there's a lot of good substance here in the minutes, and I'm just wondering how, aside from really prioritizing, what are pending items that need agendizing at the next meeting, how can we follow through on so many good points that were made here by Karen and Barbara and other committee members on items that are mentioned in the minutes, but how do we follow through on those definitively without procrastinating over several meetings? And one of my answers is maybe we need to figure out a way to more fluidly and easily call for a special meeting. That would be my comment there. How can we do that? Working with staff and, the members on the committee. But that's my comment. Any other questions?
I have a question on that, Vanilla. In our email chain, you had said that one has to have it on the agenda to discuss a special meeting, but is there anything that says we could actually have a motion to have a special meeting? Does it have to be discussed, or can we just?
No, what I said in the email chain is that things have to be agendized to be discussed in the meeting.
Right.
Here. In order to have a special meeting, no, as long as we notice the meeting in compliance with the Brown Act, we should be fine. That being said, we have to be careful that we're not just throwing in special meetings whenever we want. We have some sort of schedule for the committee. And so that is part of the goals and objectives discussion.
Okay.
Additionally, I think we're having a little bit of trouble. We keep hearing from you that we're not addressing your points, and yet we can't get a list from you of what points are not being addressed. So we are under the impression we are addressing everything. And there were no pending items in the last minutes because we have addressed the entire list of pending items. And we are bringing people to this meeting who are addressing the existing action items from the last minute. So we do not want to neglect the points you want to hear, but at this point, we aren't getting clear direction of what we're missing.
I think
Well, I thought that you had a list last time, I think it was, of items. And I haven't seen that yet, but what concerns me is that this goals objective has been put off for over a year. There's no reason why. First, Christy Smith said we couldn't talk about it even though it was on the agenda, and then it was postponed. So I think that's one reason that you'd like a special meeting.
And that could be a great reason to have a special meeting. We are not trying to postpone it, but
I understand.
like we said, we have a full agenda, yeah.
I think we have this accumulation of issues from the past few years, and no way of discussing it effectively among ourselves because of the Brown Act. For example, further down on the very bottom of the agenda is electing officers for this next year, but people haven't really discussed it with each other. I don't see how we can effectively do it just on the spot like that right now. And I would say if I were to put something onto a special meeting, it would be the election of officers so that we have a chance to regroup and figure out who's willing to do what. Not just on the fly,
Sure.
and in conformity with the Brown Act. It's very confusing, really.
I just add to that, it is kind of hard, we can't talk to each other, it is hard to say, do you want to run next time, do you want to, what position would you like? if we're not allowed to do that. So it gets kind of tough, it has to be in public.
Mhm.
But that's a good point, maybe we should have a meeting. Okay.
And that, because that is agendized, we can discuss that today. We can spend more time. Like I said, we've saved 20 minutes from not having public comment. So at the end of the meeting, we have a lot of people here who are waiting to speak, and I want to make sure they get their chance.
Yes, it's terrific to work with you, Lelia.
Oh, thank you. I mean, we just want to make sure we're doing best by you guys, and we understand we've inherited some items that weren't addressed before, but it doesn't help us to hear you're not addressing it and then not get any actual feedback of what we're not addressing. So that's just what it was.
So you're asking for a definitive list.
Yes, because I'm not sure what
Okay.
list Jim
It may require reviewing several minutes back and.
Yeah, absolutely. And so Tina is, the November minutes are missing from the archives, but she's going to work on that today. Otherwise, all of the minutes are in the archives on the website
Okay.
if you need to access them.
And were you able to find annual reports anywhere for this
So,
committee?
yeah, that is one thing that has been neglected for the past few years. That is part of our resolution that we'll report annually to council. When we inherited this committee, it had been about 5 years, I believe, since
Yes.
the annual report had gone to council.
2010 was the last time.
Yeah. so
Right,
it's
and
been
so
7 years.
Jim was planning on going to council prior to this meeting, and then the shakeup happened, so Mike and I just couldn't put it together in time
Well,
before this meeting.
thank
but
you.
It is on our list of things to do, and obviously we would need to work with possibly an ad hoc committee to put together the items we want on that, or we'll chat with you guys on how to.
That would be good, because that's what I said to city council. It was very hard to get up to speed on this committee because there was no real sense of what had happened and what the problems were and how communication went, and it was unlike any other committee I'd ever been on. And then personnel kept changing, so it was challenging.
I think we're good now. I think our
Good.
personnel's gonna stay, so hopefully that will no longer be a challenge, I'm hoping. But yeah, absolutely, we hear you on that, and that is one of our goals, is to bring that presentation to council.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Anyone here?
Something like that. Martha just walked in, Bob.
Welcome, good, okay. Any final comments, Martha? We're just going over the minutes.
I have no comments on the minutes.
No comments, okay. Any other comments from the committee? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
I move to approve the minutes.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Oh, I'm sorry,
favor.
Joe. I'm sorry, Joe. My apologies, Ken. I need to wait for you to cast your vote. And then abstain? None? Okay, minutes are passed, approved for November 2016. One thing you did, Alayla, that I appreciate is putting committee reports right after approval of minutes, which is item 5. Committee member reports.
Well, I don't know if I am considered a committee member bringing back the issue about communication. When I was looking, I said I was going to wait until things were clearer with how this committee actually was operating. But looking at the functions of the committee, I see that the committee is 3 points have to do with physical access and 3 points have to do with communication. And I realized what I volunteered for was part of a bigger project. And when I was interviewed by the city council, I said that I thought this committee needed a handbook that would bring all of these points together someplace so a person and the public and the disabled community could look to see where were the moving parts and how best to interact with us. And so that's something that I now see myself going forward with, starting with the little dialogues of how to talk to people, which is just the tip of the iceberg, and then there are all these other features.
Okay.
I think that could also be a great meeting agenda item, where we discuss where the gaps are in communication, where the needs are. And I agree with you, it's probably a bigger project than you originally signed up for. Would you entertain a motion to add it to an agenda at a later date? Hopefully the next one?
Yes,
the
yes,
19th?
that would be terrific, because by then I'll have a chance to pull together the pieces to begin.
Okay. Go ahead, Jim.
Okay, I have a few to report. In the past, the distant past now, hopefully, other groups like Public Works and Waterfront did not ask for or get building permits from the building official. So things were done without permits. And one of those things is the meters, parking meters that were put at the Waterfront lot. Carl from Waterfront came to us last year and wanted us to give approval on those meters that actually were already installed, but now they were finally getting the permits. So I've been to the HLC, Historic Landmark Committee, a few times. And in December, I went there and they finally approved Carl's plan, and he promised that they will not be higher than the maximum height, which is 48 inches. So that was twice said in the meeting that they're going to be to code. Some of them now are on a 6-inch curve, which means that the person in a chair can't reach them. So I just want to report that according to the HLC in December, Carl and the Waterfront Committee are all set to revamp or reinstall those meters to be in the right position that we were worried about. I also had a meeting with Andrew Stuffler recently about the appeals board, which basically had been making decisions on whether a person could get a waiver from not including accessible elements in a new project. And it was mostly been based on just the money involved. And we discussed the fact that more information has to be given about the use of the property, what the facility is for, what kind of people it will attract, and how does not building some accessible feature affect the disabled community. And also whether the term hardship means just a percentage over the allowed amount, or is it really based on the company? You've had multi-billion-dollar companies getting a hardship for $100,000, which to me is wrong. But anyway, we worked through that, and Andrew and I are working on new forms for the appeals board later, so they'll have more input from the disabled community and how it affects them, not just the dollar amount of the developer. And so that was good news. And the other thing was, some of us had looked at the, hold on, let me start over. There's a position called a CASP, Certified Access Specialist. And 2 years ago, or 1 year ago, we just had one person. She was a plan checker, a very good plan checker. But other people miss some of these things because it's very complicated. The test is very hard to pass. Last year, another plan checker received her certification. And I was just checking to see who in the state was newly appointed, and I saw that one of the inspectors now from Santa Barbara has now been approved. So we now have 2 plan checkers who can understand the code, but also a person in the field, because as you might know from some of my comments in the past, there's many times where things are getting built incorrectly. The plans are right, the builder or the contractor decides he doesn't like this color or doesn't like that width, and he puts it in different, and the inspectors have missed it. So now we have a certified access specialist who's a field inspector. So that to me is good news. So now within a year, we have now 3 CASP people on the building group. And I really appreciate the fact that Andrew and I think others have said, hey, get that certificate, let's be more professional. So that's good news to me that we have 3 CASP people now. And I think that was all my committee work.
Thank you, Jim. I know one thing Karen mentioned at the last meeting, she was going to look into creating a community brochure, a resource brochure to connect people in the disabled community with local agencies that serve the disabled in various capacities, I think. And the action on that was the staff was to continue that item into this meeting, but Karen is still not here, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so maybe we can include that on the agenda for a special meeting if it's the committee's wish. Anyway, any other reports? Under number 5. Okay. All right. Moving on. Says item 1 here. Review of what does it say? final access plans and look at ADA sign locations in the Cabrillo Arts Pavilion.
So this, you've heard, this group has come to the committee before, then we had a special meeting to tour the facility, and Justin Van Mullen
Yes.
took us through some of the ADA elements there. And so today we have Justin is back with some plans. We have Joe Wilcox, who's the architect on the plan, and we also have Jill Zachary, who's the Parks and Recreation Director here to just update you guys.
Okay.
Set up over here.
It's a very large project, and our plans are very large as well. It's going to be easier for me to sit in front of you.
And Justin, if I may, if you would be so kind just to, as you go through this, to, as best as you can, audio describe what you're talking about.
Absolutely. Get the
While you're setting it up, can I just ask if that pet relief station ever got put in anywhere?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
I said, while you're setting it up, I was just asking if our suggestion for a pet relief station got put in anywhere. I guess not.
That is a no.
Since then, I was surprised to know there was such a thing as you seem to be, but since then I've seen them. I've seen the one at the San Francisco airport. I saw the sign, the directional sign, so I went and took a look. It was the
There are a lot of beaches that do allow dogs, but this is not one.
I think the point with the pet relief station would be for service animals.
I want to clarify this. This is not
Thank
for
you.
pets. This is for guide dogs that need to go. And it's called a pet relief area. And we'd ask for that to be there because it's designed to be accessible. So if you haven't, can you think about that again?
Absolutely, we can restudy that. Okay.
Thank you. At the airport, it was the bomb-sniffing dogs who I met.
Well, let me start things off. Okay, today, first of all, my name, for the record, is Justin Van Mullen. I'm with the Parks and Recreation Department. Here with me in the audience is Jill Zachary, our director, and in front of you is Joe Wilcox, the lead architect from KBZ Architects. We're going to review two plan sheets today. One will be a site plan that shows the accessibility plan that you've seen twice before. Once during their August 21st, 2015 meeting that Jill Zachary presented, at which point the committee requested a tour of the facility, which was done in October 30th, 2015, 1 year and approximately 3 months ago. So I'm sure you remember the site plan, but I will walk you through it. And at that meeting, there were some suggestions, and some were implemented. I can recall one specifically where we have two ramps coming up right next to a set of stairs, and we have put large columns at the very end that kind of direct you away from that set of stairs. So we appreciate your input. That's why we're back here today, because we are looking for more input on the locations for the ADA signage, directional and otherwise. And then also, we need to document the committee's prior support of the project as required by the Historic Building Code. As you may recall, this building was built in 1926. It is a historic structure of merit, and it is eligible for the National Register of Historic Places. It is a very special building. However, currently, its current state, as the transition plan has surveyed, we've got 2 barriers in the right-of-way. We have over 30 barriers on the site and 57 barriers in the interior. These will be corrected, and our project goals and objectives are to restore and update this unique waterfront community recreation facility, broaden and enhance the facility's access, both interior and exterior, and work within the site constraints while preserving the historic integrity of the building. So, as you can see by the extremely large set of plans, they're approximately, 16 inches in diameter rolled up. And the sheet sizes, which are 30 inches by 50 inches, this is a big project, and we're getting very close to completing it. Construction, we slated, will begin January 1st, 2018. The building will be closed approximately 18 months, which we will then open back up. So, as part of the construction process, we are looking at placement for accessible signage. I'm going to walk through the site now and talk a little bit about signage. We're hoping for some input. Keep in mind, though, that we've been at this a very long time, and the input we're looking at now is more fine-tuning. We have been in process for how many years now, Jill? 3 years, 2.5, which I've been part of. So I'm going to start at the street level, and right on Cabrillo Boulevard, that's the north face of the building. We are providing a new accessible parking space. This space will have a curb cut that will also have a ramp. That'll allow a van that loads from the back to access the street from the street level, ramp up to the sidewalk level. At that point, there is a sign right in front that will give you directional arrows whether you want to go up to the ramp that will take you to the second floor level, we call it the pavilion, or to the first floor level, which we call the bathhouse.
Point of clarification, the
Yes, sir.
street parking, you said ramp with, a van with rear access ramp?
So essentially, you will be able to access the sidewalk from either a side or the rear. If you have a gate that drops down from a rear, like can sometimes be seen in buses and vans, this space will accommodate that need. Both, will accommodate both.
Thank you.
Now, is this just parking or pickup and drop off? Or is it true parking?
This is a true parking space, and to accommodate pickup, we have a lot of ability to do that at both the west and the east parking lots.
So
Which-
first come, first serve, after that, there is no access close to the
There are, yes, that is correct. There is one space at the main door, but one of the things that this project has accomplished, not only does it have a ramp now that will go up to that second floor level, that ramp is less than 5%, is that? 7.8, that ramp is 7.8%, but it's 5 feet wide. So it's a nice transition from what we have now. You get up to a much larger deck, you have more room to maneuver to get to those front doors. And then when you get inside, now we'll have accessible bathrooms. The whole entry level will be wide open, so we've removed a lot of barriers in that area, and then we'll have an elevator that will connect the first floor and the second floor, which currently we have no stairs or elevator that does that. And again, we'll have a warming kitchen that will also be accessible.
Jim, Jim asked about if it's just one parking space, but it looks to me like there's at least 7 other parking, disabled parking spots on the plan here.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, that is correct, but at the street level, there is one, and that is in the right-of-way. It is a street parking space. Now, on the actual property, there are 3 on the east side and 4 on the west side that are accessible parking spaces.
So those other things that look like parking spaces right in front of the building, are those drop-off spaces or what?
Those are 15-minute parking spaces.
Does that mean that people with a placard can park in them?
That is correct.
Okay, so they are handicap parking in a sense.
You could look at it that way, absolutely. They are 15-minute for able-bodied, and for, if you have a placard, then you have an extended period of time.
Okay,
So, at the street level, like I was mentioning, we have a sign right in front of the accessible parking space that gives you direction to the first floor accessible ramp, or a ramp that takes you along the west side and down to the west parking lot. At which point there are 4 parking spaces on the west parking lot with an accessible path of travel that will take you to showers, to a beach ramp, and also to up a ramp that will take you to the, we call it the bath house, but it's the first floor level. It's elevated by 2 steps. Those 2 steps are historic, and so what we've done is we've blended the ramp on both the east and the west side, but also extending the portico level, that raised level, and keeping the historic steps.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the beach ramp?
Yeah, so we have 2 beach ramps, one on the east and one on the west. And one of the elements that we're quite proud of is the new boardwalk that will take you out to the beach level. And essentially what it is it's planks of wood 8 feet wide that will bring you all the way out 150 feet into the sand. And at the very end, there will be a 50-foot wide by 50-foot long by 8-foot wide T. And if I could show this. So this is a view from the street level looking out to the beach, and you can see there are there's the
Looks
wood
nice.
walkway, and at the very end there's benches. Absolutely.
That looks amazing, and it's commendable. Very few wheelchair accessible beaches in the state of California.
And it's on this was a very difficult problem to solve, because we have water probably right now today crashing up against the boardwalk where the boardwalk will be. So it had to be a material that was not permanent, it's temporary. So if needed, we could remove the boardwalk in sections and pull them up. So that is the design.
Thank you for addressing our concerns.
Absolutely.
Does
And
this go right to the beach, the water itself, roughly?
so because of environmental concerns,
Sure.
we can only get so close,
I
but
understand.
we have the ability to get within 150 feet away, so it's very close. At times, we'll probably have to take out sections. Our sections are 8 foot by 8 foot. We'll remove a couple sections to shorten it based on how much sand we have that time of year.
And then you put the T back in?
Absolutely.
Okay, that sounds great, guys. I agree with Nick, 'cause there's very few access like
Yeah.
that.
Very commendable.
So, starting keeping from the west lot with our 4 accessible parking spaces, we'll come through, and like I was saying before, we have accessible showers, we have an accessible ramp to the beach. This goes down to the sand. On the east side is the boardwalk, and then we have what we call the promenade, which is about 16, 18-foot wide walkway that is in front of the building and in between the building and the sand. It'll have a low seat wall that gives people the ability to sit down and rest, or put a lot of times there's athletic events going on and people use that to keep their equipment. So talked a little bit about getting up from the west side up to the portico level, which is the first floor level. And once you're at that level, you can go into the lobby, and the lobby will give you access to the elevator that can take you to the second floor. So we're changing the whole downstairs for the commissioners that weren't part of the tour, and really opening it up. In 1926, when this building was built and designed, people used the beach very differently. They would come in what we would consider business attire, and they would change in a very large locker room and change into wool bathing suits, which they rented on site, and were laundered. We don't use the beach that way today, so we're really opening up a lot of space, trying to make it as flexible as possible, and really opening up these spaces to the community, having rooms that can be rented that are multi-purpose, a gym, large lobby, and then still have changing rooms that some can be used by the family and some can be used that men's and women's. We'll still have the public locker rooms on the east wing and on the west wing. And we'll have then kind of starting more to talk about the east side. So on the east side, as you come into that parking lot, you'll have 3 accessible parking spaces, an accessible path of travel that goes along the stoa. That is the little building that has a roof and columns. It's a shade structure, and you could call it a pergola as well. It's right in front of the currently where the playground is, but used to be a wading pool, depending on how long you've been in Santa Barbara. And so we have access now to from those parking spaces to a plaza that will give you access to the boardwalk and to showers, exterior showers. So there's showers both on the east side and on the west side now. And then there'll be access to the east side of the building as well. So on
These are external showers?
They are external showers, yeah. And one of the things that we've done is really open up the views. Right now, the showers have a big wall that's solid, and so we've taken those down and tried to minimize anything that would block the ocean view. And so you also have a clear view of the playground too.
And it also opens up the view so that if there are children in there, we can see them.
Absolutely. So we have another plaza that's right in front of the east doorway that'll take you into the new location with an accessible bathroom. That'll also get you access to a very large training room, and that'll be where the lifeguards store their equipment. We will also, one of the things that has really worked hard to provide is an accessible path of travel for emergency exits out on the north side of the building. So right where the elevator is, if there was, we have 2 accessible paths of travel that will take you out of the lower level and along the north side of the building on the east half, and bring you along to get you to the parking lot. That is also where the restaurant can have an accessible path of travel to the trash enclosure, and then there are some other parking spaces that are right in front of there that where we have drop-off potential. We've got paths that can lead you to an accessible path of travel if you were dropped off on that level. So going into signage, talked about the signage that's at the street level by the accessible parking space. There's also directional signage on the east side and on the west side that'll take you, once you've come from the accessible parking spaces, there comes a point where you're at the corner of the east of the building, and it gives you direction both to the elevator on the lobby on the first floor, and it'll also direct you to the ramp that will take you, and they'll get you to the elevator, they'll get you to the second floor, or it'll take you to the ramp that's on the west side. Then there's
Pictures or written pictures? What are you telling people?
so that sign is sign 200, that's 200, and that's 200 here is here are the two, this is what it looks like in front of the building. And the signage above, kind of giving you direction, but, and then the actual sign, and it's right here, and it gives you arrows, and it says ramp to upper level, and it gives you an arrow. Yes. Yeah, and ramp to elevator into the lobby. Absolutely. So there's, each one of the numbers that are on the site plan corresponds to a sign that's already been developed with the, where the arrows are. And those signs are highlighted on this lower portion of the page where you see elevations.
Would you hold just a second, I'll give you.
Okay.
Thank you. It's clear.
So, kind of wrapping things up, we've got the main goal was once you've either come from the sidewalk or you've parked in an accessible parking space, you'll be given direction to either the upper level, the lower level, or the elevator. And that happens most of the time either in front of the parking space at the street level or right when you get to a point where in your path of travel you have the ability to make a decision whether you're going up or down, or and that has been the primary goal of the sign plan. Do you have anything to, I've been talking a long time, Joe, do you have
You're doing a great job.
anything to add?
No, you're doing a great job. I think one thing to make clear is this building really acts like two separate buildings. The beach level is one type of building, and the building off of Cabrillo is its own building.
Yeah.
And years ago, Cabrillo used to be on the ocean side, believe it or not. And if you dig down in the sand, you can find the AC paving that's still there.
Wow.
That was something I learned through this project. You want to talk about the ramping now?
No, I think, well, just, I can just give them some background on, so the ramping, like I was saying, we've got 7.8% on the ramp that goes from the sidewalk level to the second floor. The ramp that goes from the sidewalk level down to the beach level is, it's gently starts off at 4.7%, 4.7%, and then goes to 7.8%. This is a 7-foot wide ramp. And then at the section that is on the far west of the building, it goes to 7.8% until it gets down to the beach level, which we call the promenade.
You call the what?
Promenade.
The beach level, the promenade that is the piece of paving that is in front of the building.
Yeah, just the words when you said it, sorry.
And these do have the required level landings on
Yes,
it.
Absolutely.
And just for knowledge, I think that 8% is the maximum for a ramp.
8.33.
I just wanted you to know that this is less than the maximum.
Correct.
And all of them are wider as well.
Right.
So the architect really worked hard to make sure that they're as gentle as the site constraints can allow, and wide so you can have two-way traffic passing.
And just curiosity, it wasn't practical to find a way to get from the east parking lot up to the sidewalk in the front?
So as part of the site visit, we did talk about this, and there's a couple different things that are happening. So we had several goals that were competing, and we had some site constraints. Now, on the east side, we have the goal of providing access to our trash enclosure, access to the elevator, and access to the new entrance that's on the east end. And that causes a pretty steep drop to happen from the sidewalk level to where the trash enclosure or the path is. And we also have a high-pressure gas line that is right in the way. You can see that gas line that goes across. We're working with the gas company to have that removed, but it's been a very long process, and there are no guarantees. So with all of those, and
And you need it for the restaurant.
so, and then the other reason is that this is a historic building. And we've taken this to HLC to provide a ramp on that side with the site constraints and all our accessibility goals. We would provide a ramp that is essentially 1,000 square feet. It would be 28 feet wide by 36 feet long. It would have, yeah, you want to bring it out? Might as well.
That's why I'm here. We did study a ramp on the east side.
Okay, I think my question's been answered.
Okay.
It's been
Okay.
studied.
It has
It
been
wasn't
studied.
viable.
We've worked very hard.
1, 2, 3, it was a 4-lane switchback ramp that took up a major part of the site.
Okay.
So using the historic building code, we have some flexibility with this building. That is probably the only element that would require the historic building code. But that's also one of the reasons that we're here today, is not only to look at signage and get some really good feedback, but also have the minutes reflect what we've, as we've gone through this process. And
Support the fact that we won't be able to do an east ramp. We're going to need that support, because we're going to use the historic building code that allows you to go 200 feet away for a ramp, and we're within 200 feet, so we're good. Right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question about the height of the signs? From what I could see, it looked like they're 5 to 7 feet, something like that.
Uh, 40 inches.
Oh,
To the bottom, for the first
To the
part of the
bottom.
lettering, yeah.
oh, okay.
May I suggest that perhaps a good thing would be on the website when this is built, just let people know that if they need the ramp, they should park on the website. Once Nick's there the first time, they'll figure it out, the visitors won't know. It's just a little word that says that. But I agree with you, there's no sense of it, it's a huge switchback. Because you guys could have gotten away with doing a lot less because it's historic, right? So I appreciate the
That's the
fact.
only historic card we're going to play.
Right. Thank you.
Other comments from the committee? I have a couple questions myself. Based on recent experience, I don't want to assume anything, but you mentioned the path of access from the east lot down to the beach or down to the building, and the other pathways of access. I assume that there are the 3-foot wide strips of truncated domes that are dividing these pathways from parking lots or other
Yes.
structures. Good, okay.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, there's been a lot of thought that has gone into placement of the truncated domes and trying to minimize the amount of federal yellow truncated domes that would be placed on the site while also providing necessary warning.
Can you clarify that? And what do you mean by minimizing? Are you saying less than 3 feet wide or
No.
length?
Location, just minimizing the locations based on just good design.
Okay. Another question. What, being this building is an historical landmark, what restrictions do you still face or are you under as far as altering the actual structure of the building in terms of removing barriers inside and that sort of thing? Are you still, are you chafing under those, or are they working within your design? How's that
We're
working?
making the entire interior accessible. All the restrooms are accessible, the elevators are accessible, all the doors are accessible. That's not an issue. We're going to remove the existing roof and put it back on after we seismically upgrade the roof.
Okay.
We've taken to HLC, they looked at the exterior of the site and approved
Good.
it.
Okay.
And the truncated domes are all code issues, and it's been plan checked by the building department.
Good.
We're meeting code, so.
Very good. Very good.
That
My last
promenade
question.
also has to be accessible for emergency vehicles, so we had, that was part of the formula as well, as far as being able to get the certain width there.
Okay, good. My last question is maybe one for Jill, and welcome back to the committee, by the way. You've spoken to us a couple times. I think Justin mentioned that once the building closes in January of 2018, it'll be closed for 18 months. Does the Parks and Rec Department of the city have a contingency plan for redirecting people who want to plan an event to other facilities. I know you have wonderful facilities like the Louise Lowry Davis Center and the Carrillo Rec Center and places like that, but is there any kind of communication or direction you have as a contingency plan once this building closes for a good year and a half?
Thank you, Jill Zachary. Thank you for that question. We do. In fact, we're doing a couple of things right now related to planning for the building to be closed in terms of relocating programs. So some of the programs that we run through there are summer programs. So they'll be moving, for example, to Ledbetter Beach. And then the actual facilities, we're working on developing upgrades to facilitate use of our other facilities as well as marketing materials. So that people will know that we have the other facilities. The challenges are, they're not all at the beach.
Right.
That's why everybody loves going
Big
to the
challenge.
pavilion.
Yeah, big challenge.
But we do have a huge facility at Korea Recreation.
Yes.
It's a great
That's been
opportunity.
redone recently. It's
Correct.
nice upgrade. So good. I figured you would. I just wanted to get a little more detail on what you folks were planning in that regard. Thank you.
Bob, I have a question for Jill. The beach wheelchairs will be relocated and available for use, or will they be out of commission for the 18 months?
Actually, I'll have to get back to the advisory committee on that. I think it will be, we have them inside the facility. When we relocate our beach-related activities to Ledbetter Beach, we will need to have storage for the variety of equipment that we use, and we'll be looking at where to most appropriately place that based on the programs that we're offering that summer. But it's something that we would consider. I can't tell you exactly where they would be, but we will have to have temporary storage for the things that we need to operate programs.
Good question, Mark. Yes. Anything else?
Well, I have two thoughts. I hope that you can consider putting in a guide dog relief area. And if you don't know much about
Yes.
that, maybe check with the Braille Institute or something, but there's a lot of information on it. It would just help. The other thing is, and I hope this is solved by the time you're done, but there are still some illegally placed meters in your two parking lots. And so that means that some people can't get access to the meter, which means they can't get access to all the programs in the building. Now, if this isn't going to be done until mid-2019, I'm sure by that, I hope by that time Waterfront will have those plans solved. But I just want to let you know that right now, there's a little problem there, but it should be fixed in time. Okay. And thank you. It's a good plan, and I appreciate it.
Any other comments or questions?
And Bob, just in the interest of time, because we are running up against our deadline, do you
Okay.
have a request to make to the committee, Justin?
I've made the request, and just that the committee, as part of our historic building code requirements, the committee document their prior support for the project. We've been in front of the committee 2 times, this is our 3rd time now, so, but the minutes don't reflect that we've received positive comments.
So just tonight
I'll
is-
entertain a motion then. Would that be appropriate? Entertain a motion that the committee adopt, give our stamp of approval so far to this plan? Is that appropriate?
Specifically to support I guess,
Plan as
the
designed
the
without
site
the East
plan.
grant.
Yeah, the site plan as designed without the East grant.
So,
as required by the historic building
so
code.
moved, and that the minutes reflect it.
And also Justin and I discussed developing a letter that the committee could sign on to present, if you're interested in doing that.
Barbara, do you include that as part of your motion? That the
Yes, and that,
committee sign on the
yes,
letter?
and that it be included in the
Okay.
minutes.
Is there a second to that?
I'll second.
Okay. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? You got it.
That's what you need.
Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for mentioning that the minutes hadn't reflected it, because we've been having so many problems with the minutes reflecting the things that we thought we were covering.
So we've been coming to this committee for, I guess over 2 years now.
Okay, if we're done with that, then our next item is a 5-minute break.
Yeah, let's just take a quick break. We do have a number of staff waiting to talk to us about the parking issues.
Yes.
So could you reconvene, give Joe a quick break to our hands?
Thank you all for the presentation.
Moving right along.
I am?
I'm Joe Wilcox. You help me with the
Oh, right, yeah.
Thanks for all your hard work on that.
Yeah, I'm
You were very
retired from
helpful.
ILRC, but there's a new, Richard, who's the new director, and she'd be wonderful, and I'd be more
Well,
than
I've
happy
heard your name for a
to
long
help.
time, and I wanted to say hi.
Oh,
and thank you for your help. Yeah.
Yeah, no
Yeah.
problem.
Joe,
Yeah.
how long have you been with KBZ?
41 years.
Oh, all along then.
They've been together for 60-some. I started in 75.
So Ken Kruger was a dear friend of the family.
Uh-huh.
He and my father built that house on the beach together.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. My father was the builder,
Was he?
property owner, and he knew he couldn't get it done
Is
without.
your last name Kuntz?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I met your father years ago. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. We miss Ken.
Yeah,
We miss him a lot.
We miss
so,
Ken too.
Yeah.
Ken designed my house.
Oh, he did?
Yeah, and
Very
Ken's
cool.
designed every house I've ever lived in.
Really? Well, it seems like I just started there, but then I counted it up and went, wow.
Joe,
So,
you sound a lot younger than working anywhere for 41 years.
well, I just turned 65 this month, so
Did you really?
that's a mind trick.
What day?
February 13th.
Oh my gosh, we're real close.
Did you go to Westmont?
Yeah.
So my wife went to Westmont with you, and I've seen you in town forever. Sharon, her name was Jensen back then. Sharon Jensen. Yeah, we've been married 35 years, so. And you used to play guitar, right?
Yeah, I still do.
I do every day, twice a day.
Awesome.
Play all the time.
That's awesome. That's
And I've
great.
seen you perform.
Yeah, we're in St. Raphael's Church. My wife and I have been married 34 years in July, so you got us by 1 year.
1 year.
But
Yeah.
yeah, we both had birthdays this month. I'm 66
When's your day?
today.
Today?
Happy birthday, Bob!
I didn't want to.
Yeah.
The longer you ask me,
I hated turning 30. 65 was tough.
Happy birthday,
So
Bob.
happy birthday, Bob.
Yeah.
I'll say Sharon. I'll tell Sharon you remember her.
Please do.
Yeah.
Nice to see you again.
You too.
Take care.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, what are the chances of
Thanks for saying hi.
Access Advisory Committee meeting falling right on my?
They should have brought you a cake.
No. I didn't want to. I didn't want to publicize it. It's no big deal.
Why not? Well, you don't look any older and you don't look that old
I
either.
feel great. The Lord's blessed me with good health. So far,
So far, so
so
good.
good. Yes.
When is your wife's birthday?
September 15th.
So,
Do you have something special planned for today?
Actually, yeah, we're going to lunch with some friends and gonna go see La La Land down at the Paseo Nuevo Cinema.
Oh,
It's a great movie.
yes, the music's terrific.
Yeah, that's why we're going. You're the
Yeah.
and the tap dancing.
And the tap dance.
Yeah.
Did you ever live in Los Angeles?
I did for went to a rehab program for about 6 months. Lived down in the West LA, Baltimore Hills area. Foundation for Juvenile wanted to have a little campus there. We had a program called a vocational independent program. Learned a lot of basic skills that I really didn't learn much coming out of high school and college. It was good. It was a good program.
But you weren't around the city a lot.
Enough to learn a little bit of the area.
Because this is really a
No, they're talking about it.
a love song about Los Angeles.
That
too.
layer right
Shows
there,
many
I don't
different
know.
places
Oh,
around
okay.
Los
That's what I
Angeles.
hear. Well, Patty grew up in Hancock Park.
Oh,
Yeah,
well,
Van Ness Avenue, so.
she'll enjoy, you know.
She does
I
good.
don't know how
So
they,
that, like, in
how
the
they do
accessible
that.
reader,
So, yeah, there's lots of places around Los Angeles
That's my guess. I was reading that before I got here.
that will be apparent.
One of my favorite authors is Jonathan Kellerman. He's a child psychologist, murder mystery writer, Alex Delaware novel. And I've learned a lot about LA just through his books.
Well, most of the settings are places that are recognizable.
Oh, yeah.
For people
I believe
who
it.
lived in LA.
Yeah.
And places that they've been.
That's great.
Well, the thing maybe that's lacking.
You're about to
is the number of
reconvene?
Spaces that
Okay.
are available.
Okay, let's come back to order. The Access Advisory Committee, we have, let's see, what is this? Item 2, ADA parking update. A lot of discussion on this, I'm sure.
So we have a number of staff here to support this item today, primarily Derek Bailey from Transportation
Hi, Derek.
Traffic Engineering. His group just got a name change recently. Is here going to talk about on-street disabled parking. So his group provided this map to us, so he's going to discuss that a bit more. And based on the past action items, we also brought Captain Todd Stoney from the police department to address any questions. They didn't have any specific items to present, but they're here in case there have been questions in the past. We're here to address those today. And just one more thing I wanted to note from the last minutes, we had talked about bringing other transportation staff to discuss the Vision Zero project and its ADA implications. But when I chatted with them, they didn't really think there was anything.
What, zero?
The Vision Zero.
Vision Zero.
Mhm.
We touched on it last meeting, and I'm not remembering too much.
Yeah,
what it was.
Bob, you had brought it up actually,
Yes.
and I spoke with Peter Brown, who's running the Vision Zero project, and he didn't really think there was anything in particular that was applicable to this group, but if we had
Okay.
specific questions, he'd be happy to address them.
Okay.
So from that, I'm going to give it to Derek to talk about for us today.
Good morning, my name is Derek Bailey. I'm with the city's traffic engineering group. Up until January 1st, this past January 1st, the group I'm in, traffic engineering, we managed on-street parking in the city. All on-street parkings, whether it's timed or loading zones, etc. That's recently been transferred over to the downtown parking group, so I'm here to kind of share what was done in the past. And Steve Zisler from Downtown Parking, I want to wave Steve in the audience. He's here as well, and moving forward in the future, Steve will likely play a bigger role in this. So I just, what I was asked to come talk about was residential on-street disabled parking spaces and kind of what our practice has been in the past and where we are right now with things.
Can I just mention, Derek, as you move through these slides, can you please describe them?
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay, so what I'm calling the former practice, this is our old approach to things. Basically, it was a pretty simple process. You know, we get a call from the public about could they get a blue zone installed at a certain location. You know, we made them available at residential locations mostly. And some of the requirements is that the applicant had to have a disabled placard or a license plate. The applicant had to have no available convenient off-street parking. And I'll come back to that in a second and what that means. And the resident has to be an adjacent property. But for example, not for visitors, but for residential, it has to be for the resident of the home. And basically after that, we would move forward most often installing a blue zone. What I mean by the applicant has no available convenient off-street parking is occasionally we would get requests from the public to install a blue zone in front of their residence. When we would go out and inspect, we would find that they had a perfectly good driveway, wide, flat, but it could be used for storage. or, you know, they might have other vehicles in there. You know, we would hear, or we talk to the applicant about it and say, well, you know, we noticed a vehicle that's already in that driveway. Are you able to use it? And sometimes what they would say is, well, if I'm parking there, then my brother that I live with might have to park 2 blocks away and walk. So before we displace neighborhood parking, we would normally require the applicants to fully utilize good on-street parking if it's available, or good on-site parking if it's available. So the one change that we've had, I'm going to move forward with the slides now, is the difference between installing a blue zone and making it accessible. So we've been talking to the Federal Highway Administration lately. I sat through a presentation last year talking about PROAG, the public right-of-way ADA guidelines. They've not been adopted yet, but according to the Federal Highway Administration, they do recommend that agencies use PROAG as a best practice right now. It's coming. So what that means is in order for us to install a non-street blue zone, it must meet ADA standards. So a lot of the blue zones that we have in the city right now technically aren't accessible. They do provide a convenient reserved parking space for people with disability placards and license plates, but they're technically not, don't meet accessible standards. So I'm going to just show a few pictures of what that looks like if we were to make them accessible. I think Justin from Parks in last presentation, he was describing the on-street parking space in front of the Arts Pavilion on Cabrillo, what an accessible space looks like. And basically what it means is there's an access aisle between the parked vehicle and the curb, so that there is space for a ramp to be let down off the side of the vehicle or out the back of the vehicle. And there's also a ramp to get from that access aisle up onto the sidewalk, so there's an accessible pathway to the sidewalk. This type of configuration also provides drivers with the flexibility that if the driver wants to exit from their side of the vehicle, that vehicle can actually be pulled right into that recessed part of the curb. That way they're not getting right out into the traffic lane, and then there still is an accessible pathway up onto the sidewalk. So this type of configuration is quite flexible. This would be a mid-block type configuration. Moving forward one slide. At the end of the block, and I will say that that mid-block style configuration it is expensive to build. That's not a minor effort. The public right-of-way ADA guidelines are going to give us the flexibility that if the blue zone is at the end of the block and there's a pedestrian access ramp at the end of the block, that can be considered the accessible pathway onto the sidewalk. So the diagram that I've shown up on the screen just shows a vehicle parked at the end of the block, and there's a pedestrian access ramp at the end of the block. So that would provide convenient and accessible pathway onto the sidewalk. So that type of configuration obviously would be a lot less expensive, especially if there's a pedestrian access ramp already in place. This could be as simple as blue paint and a sign in order to install it. So that's kind of the difference between what we used to do and what we have to do now. We did put together the map of locations that we have in the city of existing blue zones. And like I said, the majority of them are not meeting the standards that I just showed up on the screen. So with that, I'd like to open it up to questions.
Bob, I have one question. The configuration that you're showing at the end of the block, is that a typical configuration for the city of Santa Barbara's access ramps at the corner location?
Thanks for that question. No, it's not. This diagram we copied directly from the PROAG document. Our access ramps, they vary. We have multiple designs depending on the sidewalk configurations, usually the biggest driver of what our access ramps look like, whether or not there's a parkway in between the sidewalk and the street, or if the sidewalk is right up against the curb. It all plays into slopes and everything and what type of ramp we can use. But this particular type of ramp that's illustrated, which shows a really large radius and a quite lengthy stretch of truncated domes. I don't believe we have any like that in the city.
Typically, you have a smaller entrance with some curbing on either side to sort of limit the access to the traveled ways, isn't that true?
That's true.
Other questions?
I know myself and perhaps other members of this committee have a sense that the number of wheelchair accessible on-street parking spaces is diminishing. And I'm wondering if your records support or deny that feeling, that sentiment, or is it that they're being moved from on-street to public parking lots? And I also hear the concern about the on-street parking we have is not to code. But I personally have a feeling that it would be better to leave the existing non-conforming than remove them in hopes of, building another one to code somewhere that might not pan out because of cost.
Right. Thanks for the question. No, we are not, the number of blue zones is not diminishing. Over the last 5 years, something in the order of magnitude that we've added about 40 and removed about 10 to 15. And the only reason that we remove blue zones right now is if the blue zone was installed in front of a specific residence at the request of a specific person and they move, what we will go do is we'll go observe that location and just make sure it's not being used by somebody else. And if it appears over time that it's not being used, and it's one that's tucked back into a residential area that's unlikely to be used by or needed by somebody else, then it'll be removed. But as far as the blue zones that are on in other locations in the city, there's no plans to remove them, even replace them. If they are ever removed, they'll be replaced in kind at a very nearby location that would provide similar access to adjacent land uses.
I've not confirmed this myself, but I've heard that the blue zone in front of the Arlington Theater was removed in the last year or so. Do you know anything about that, why it was removed?
No, I don't believe it was removed.
It looks like they got it.
I wasn't familiar with that there was one there, but we did not remove one in the last year.
Okay, thank you.
Is that something we can look into further? Because, Jim, I thought you mentioned.
Well, I actually sent a list a few days ago of complaints I heard from wheelchair users, and I asked that it be addressed today. I haven't heard that yet. It was a list of all sorts of downtown blue zones that have disappeared. I was hoping we would hear about that. For us, just because you put a residential place outside the central business district does not help people who are shopping. So I think that it's getting confused with the geography. Perhaps the total number of blue spaces have increased. But I sent a list. Leila, do you have that?
You sent, all you mentioned in your email was the Arlington Plaza. I don't recall a list in any of those
A
emails.
whole long copy paste.
We were on that.
Yeah, can you confirm who and when you sent that to?
Yeah, because
Well,
none
it
of
was
us
in the
received
last
it.
2 days, and it was in an email with Leila.
I did not receive one,
Okay.
sorry.
Well, there's a lot of them seem to not be downtown and it used to be. And if somehow it didn't get there, can I email it to you directly?
That'll be turned over to downtown parking. After this,
You're out of that.
I'm out of the on-street
Okay.
parking business, but
I assume-
I can share with you that I've been with the city a little over 5 years,
Mhm.
and in the downtown area, There haven't been any blue zones removed that I'm aware of.
Why? That's not why.
In the last 5 years,
Okay.
I can't speak to
I'll
before
look at
that.
that.
How do we follow up on that? And Derek, Mr. Bailey, who would be our contact person in the parking district to do email correspondence regarding these?
Steve Sizzler's here today, and
Okay.
there are others in the downtown parking group as well, but
Okay.
Very good.
Can you include the names of these people in the minutes so that we can refer back to them? Thank
Yes.
you.
You said that PROAC is suggested to be used for these residential spots, correct? It's not-
the
not
advice we were
blind.
given by the Federal Highway Administration is to treat it as best practice.
It just seems sometimes like overkill because many people with a placard do not have a wheelchair. And it just said, it seems overkill to say that every blue space in front of a resident need to have wheelchair accessibility. And I don't know if there's a way around that, but truthfully, the majority of people with a placard are not using wheelchairs. So,
I understand. We can look into the legality.
okay, I wonder if there's a way to get a waiver from the homeowner and say, hey, I don't need a wheelchair spot, I just need to be able to be close because I have another problem.
Yeah, and that makes total sense. The one concern we had with that is if somebody else moved in nearby or was visiting, and we're portraying this newly installed space as being accessible, and they found it not to be accessible.
Okay.
So, I understand your point, though, that
To me, if the homeowner asks for it and doesn't need a wheelchair, then it's not, doesn't have to be called an accessible blue curb. It's just a way to maybe save some money. It
Right.
just seems like overkill.
it is a lot of money. Thank you.
And then you had in the past had some parking enforcement questions, so I would encourage you to ask any of those while we have Captain Sterling here.
I certainly have concerns about enforcement. I think maybe one of the reasons we're feeling like there's a diminished availability of wheelchair accessible parking is because there are more people with wheelchair accessible parking permits, and so it just seems like there's no parking available. And I think that there's also a lot of abuse. I think that as far as priorities go, there's plenty of things that our police force has to deal with before enforcing parking, and I think that most of the abusers know that and take the risk and abuse it, thinking they're going to get away with it. And I would really like to support a community enforcement. I know I brought that up before, and I have heard back that parking enforcement is not in favor of that, but I'd like them to reconsider.
Thank you. My name is Todd Stoney. I'm a captain with the police department. I've been with the department for 26 years now. I was hoping to bring one of our parking enforcement officers today, but with the weather, we're kind of all hands on deck out there dealing with flood issues. But I did want to address some of the concerns, and I was a motor officer for 10 years, so I've dealt with a lot of parking issues and complaints by the citizens. I do echo some of your concerns. I do agree that people are sometimes willing to take the risk. The one thing you can know about handicap parking spots, it's a $480 fine, so it's the heaviest fine that we will issue for a parking ticket, so it makes the risks a little bit more risky for you when you're that big a ticket. In terms of our parking enforcement posture, we do have parking enforcement officers. All our officers are trained. We're out there in the field writing tickets. You have to understand in terms of call priorities, we prioritize our calls all the way from a 1 to a 4. 1 would be if somebody potentially is going to be injured or lose life, so that will be our highest priority dispatch calls. I checked the board right before I walked in here today. We had 48 calls waiting on the board in terms that were backed up in terms of officers' response, and we have 11 officers working today. So some days a call will come in on a handicap that we're able to dispatch an officer or parking enforcement officer immediately. Other times it can wait for a significant amount of time. We're aware of that. In terms of some of the things that we're doing right now, our new chief has really put an emphasis on upping our volunteer corps. trying to get at least 10, if not 20, over the next 2 years. And one of the things that we're going to put them in, the home volunteers and policing, and they will be able to issue parking citations in the field, so they will, they're actively looking for those type of violations. The other thing, over the last 2 to 3 years, we have had, you probably read in the paper, significant staffing issues. We were at one point down almost 20 officers, so that certainly increases the amount of time it's going to take to get to a lower priority call. For the first time since I've been here in 25 years, we are 1 officer short of being fully staffed. They will all be on the street, able to enforce in the next 6 months. So I hope that will also increase the number, the speed at which we can get to a call like that.
Great to hear that the new chief is more open to the volunteer and potentially, citizen enforcement. I know I've found, and I've mentioned to the committee here, and I believe I mentioned to the committee, no, maybe I haven't brought that before the committee. There's an app that is available for mobile devices that is intended to facilitate community enforcement and streamline that communication with law enforcement, and it's been proven to increase revenues and reduce the abuse in some major metropolitan areas. And I hope that maybe that's something we can get support from the local police department to implement here.
The one thing to keep in mind in terms of citizens, the volunteers that we do bring on, we do a full vetting process to do a background on them to make sure that they are not just issuing a ticket book to somebody who isn't going to have some responsibility with that. The other issue is that there is a procedure that we have, it's required by law, that if someone wants to contest a ticket, it can go all the way to a commission hearing, so we have to have that person available to come in and testify in terms of why they wrote the tickets. A lot of times they'll take pictures of the actual violation, which generally minimizes the amount of
doubt.
The hearings, yeah, it's the picture with license plates in the handicap zone, but there is still a requirement that we make that person who wrote the ticket available to do if somebody wants to contest their ticket.
Just for information, this app that he mentioned is different than that. It's just that any citizen can take a picture of the front, back, license plates, the spot, the sign. We've got 5 or 6 different required photographs, and then it goes into a database. So it's not issuing a ticket, it's letting the police know. If you've got pictures of a person parked there with no placard and no plate, that's enough proof for you, right? Even if you're not there.
You need to issue a ticket not actually being...
Yeah, I think the way the app works is the citizen enforcer would take the number of pictures and fill out the required information, submit that to the database, and if the municipality was participating, that would be pushed into the parking enforcement's view, and they would issue the ticket by mail and expect to collect the revenue that way.
That's interesting. I haven't heard of that before. I was on the committee probably 10 years ago where we were looking at enforcement of red lights by cameras. Our city council was not in approval of that, where we took a picture of someone violating and send a ticket in the mail. But it's certainly an intriguing idea. I'd be more than willing if maybe afterwards.
Would you mind if I send you details on that?
I would love to do that, and I'll take a look at it, and we'll do some research
Yep.
on it, and if it's something you'd like, at least we can make a presentation and see if that's something the city would be willing to move forward on.
Raise your income too.
Well, we don't like to look at tickets as doing that, but, but.
Maybe you need new shoes.
I think that with the amount of abuse I'm seeing right now, if there was a patrol officer assigned exclusively to enforcing wheelchair accessible parking violations, they would generate enough revenue to justify their own income or their own salary.
Do you have any other questions for Captain Stoney or Derek Bailey or Stu Sisler?
A quick one. I somehow saw recently that maybe 60% or so of tickets issued for disabled parking are cleared up when the person comes in with the placard or plate? Is it that high for not putting their placard out but having one?
I'll have to do some research on that.
So we did include that as well as the number of ADA parking spaces added versus removed on our fact sheet that we brought last time, which is also now on the website, or we're working on the website.
They're working on it.
And yes, what I was sent by the parking enforcement supervisor was literally a list of all tickets, an Excel spreadsheet of all the ADA tickets, and then how many were voided due to placard. So it was
Seems awfully high. Lazy people.
I guess so. I guess so, yeah.
Okay.
Question I had, I know last meeting, Mr. Kalan gave a very in-depth presentation on the whole, several facets of the disabled parking issue. One of them, I don't know if it was addressed or not, but I think Jim or one of my committee members mentioned to me, what about visitor parking? If a person comes into town in an accessible vehicle and there's lack of accessible parking in the area with the person they're visiting or maybe where they're staying. Was that addressed at all in the
I don't think it has been addressed yet because we haven't had a chance to have any problems yet. So I think that was the general perception.
Bob, were you talking about the oversized vehicle ordinance that Cologne talked about?
Yeah, maybe that was it. If somebody came in with an oversized vehicle, but also what if they were disabled and they required an oversized vehicle for their, say, their van accommodation? Is that a common scenario or not?
Committee Member Burnham, this is Derek. I can speak to part of that based on what I know of the oversized vehicle ordinance. So there's going to be permits available that provide exemptions to the prohibition. One type of permit that is going to be for mobility vehicles specifically. So mobility vehicles will be exempt from the prohibition. The other type of permit is going to be a temporary permit. So if there are guests coming to town that have an oversized vehicle, there will be a way for them to get a permit so that they can park in the city. The plan is to make those permits available online. So if they're coming from somewhere else, they can get that ahead of time, and then when they arrive in the city, they can make use of it.
Sounds like that'll expedite the process. Yeah. Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Well, thank you both, or all of you, for updating us on this.
Hang on, Captain Stern does have one more
I'd
comment.
just like to say, if I can give you my email address so I can get some information on the video or the camera.
Great.
We could include it on the minutes.
Yeah, that'd be
and
great.
we'll hand them out quicker this
And
time.
I will look into it and let you know what research I find as a result of that.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
We will also include Steve Sisler's email because there were some questions that came through.
Okay. Are we wrapped up then on this item?
Yes.
If so, moving on to item 3, engineering capital project updates. Laura, Inez, and others, you have the floor.
Laura's making her way up here.
Good morning. Once again, I'm Laura Yanez. I'm an engineer with the Streets Design section of engineering, and we come periodically to give you an update on our projects that we're working on. So here I am again, starting with projects currently in construction. We have the CDBG, which is a grant funding source, 1617 project which includes adding ramps on Sunset Avenue. So that project is adding 9 ramps along Sunset Avenue, that's on the west side, as well as ADA crossing at Old Coast Highway. so installing ramps accessible to the tennis courts there on Old Coast Highway. And then coming up closely to construction, final design, we have the La Cumbre Sidewalk Infill project. So that project will be installing sidewalk from Villa Lucero to Stacy Lane along La Cumbre.
Is that on the south or the north side?
North.
Actually, west.
Oh yeah, it would be
West side.
West side has minor missing sections. It's actually the east side that has the most.
East side.
Yeah, so the east side is the one getting the major improvement. There's also ADA ramps that will be installed at the corners. Next, we have the Montecito Bridge project, which will make the bridge ADA accessible, adding sidewalk, as well as add missing sidewalk along Salinas Street from Mason to Clifton. So that's also on the east side. Next, we have the Cacique Bridge. So that project will be replacing the existing pedestrian and bicycle bridge, as well as add missing sidewalk along Soledad Street on the west side, so from Cacique Street over to Carpinteria Street. And another sidewalk infill project is the Milpas infill project, which will add missing sidewalk from the on-ramp to Cabrillo Street, so on the east side as well, through the railroad. So there'll be also adding improvements there.
I'm sorry, did you say again where that was?
On Milpa Street,
Okay.
from the on-ramp, freeway on-ramp, all the way to Cabrillo.
Okay.
So any missing sidewalk along there, so along,
Tri-County Produce?
correct, in front of Tri-County. And then finally, we have the Section 130 project, which will improve the rail crossing on State Street. So that's the final project. And it'll include some medians and ramps and replacing sidewalks since it's already some there.
Laura, last time you were here, you mentioned some I believe crosswalk enhancements on De La Vina at Arden and Kylarella's and I think one other intersection. What's
yes.
what's the timeline on those?
Actually, that one's also in construction. It's part of the ramps, Old Coast, and De La Vina all got lumped into one project. And it's installing flashing beacons at a couple crossings on De La Vina. So with the push button, and then it'll activate the flashing beacons.
Those are not in the pavement, those are on poles?
Correct.
Is that what they call the hawk light?
No, I believe the hawk light is with the traffic signal.
Okay.
Flashing beacons are similar to the ones on Salinas and Cacique
Not
or
familiar.
Milpas.
Or is it like the one in Old Town Goleta on Hollister?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, got it. And what criteria do you need to get the ball rolling on that type of project? Because I'm aware of an area that needs that type of light, and I'm just wondering, is there a process?
So those are usually funded by safety grants, and it's data driven, so based on accidents, collision reports of the area, pedestrian incidents. And so based on that data, we rank our projects, the ones with the highest, and we go down the list, basically.
Okay.
Is there a specific location?
Does it-
in town?
Yeah, Kylarella's and Foothill.
Oh, okay, I think that's in the county.
It is a county,
Yeah.
unfortunately, but I had forgotten about that.
And it also, there's a lot of criteria depending on the speeds and
Yeah.
a lot of factors.
So you do have some more slated like you're looking at.
Yes, they're actually going in soon.
Yeah.
Another question I had, kind of a little off the subject, but I'll throw this out. In the CDBG timeline, and you mentioned sidewalk infill, there are other areas of sidewalk around town that either need repair or widening, whether it be vegetation inside the sidewalk or disintegrating tree wells or those types of variables. What is the process in terms of the monies that you folks deal with in terms of tackling some of those projects?
So most of our grant funding is for infill, where there is no sidewalk. Our streets division actually, where Jim Dewey is at now, they tackle repairs of existing, so uplifted because of roots or overgrowth. So I believe there's actually online where you can, a number or a form you can submit your, maybe Alelia can help with that.
Good, okay.
Any concerns that you have, and I believe they target a certain area of town every year, and so if your complaint happens to land in that area, they can potentially pick it
Because
up.
I have a whole list, so
Yeah.
I'll just divvy it out according to what Jim can handle, I guess.
Yeah, and you can maybe ask him what he's working on, what area.
Okay, thank you.
Specific concerns. I know if there's a specific facility or something, those usually tend
Yeah.
to
Okay.
prioritize.
I have a curiosity. I understand that because Foothill Road is a county highway, that's why it falls under the county jurisdiction, even though it is in the city limits. But Calle Laureles is not a county highway. It's a city street, and that's the street that has the problem. So,
I would have to take a look at the scenario and whether, like I said, if there's a certain collision or pedestrian.
the problem is the collisions that happen there are at low speed and they don't get reported. People want to just handle it, without insurance and without the police involvement, but literally every day there's a collision on that intersection.
Are you talking about crossing Calle Laureles or
Crossing Foothill on Calle
So that's
Laureles.
the problem, is if you're crossing Foothill, that's the county.
It's actually
Is that
between county
Caltrans?
and Caltrans,
Yeah.
so it's actually the state.
Quick question. I think last meeting you mentioned you guys were able to push up the corner of Can Perdido and Laguna where Path
Yes.
Point is. Did you get to that yet, or what's the time?
So actually, we just had interviews to get the funding last Friday, and we find out probably the second weekend in March whether we get the money.
Second week of March.
Yeah.
I mean, you find out if you get funding.
Correct.
And then if you do,
It'll be built, I would say next summer. So,
a year from now.
correct.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Laura. It's always good to hear an update from you.
And hopefully we'll have updates that they're all completed next fall.
Okay. All right. Well, our last item says election of chair and vice chair, but I think we agreed that we wanted to use this time to maybe schedule a special meeting with this item on the agenda, as well as maybe discussing our goals and objectives list. Is that what we, kind of a consensus we came to?
I'm not sure that we came to that consensus. I had mentioned we could have a discussion now. If you would prefer, then you could make a motion and Mike could entertain it. Or we could have a special meeting in between our next meeting.
Yeah, our next meeting is scheduled for May. I don't even have the date on my calendar. I haven't looked that far ahead.
So I just want to be, and I'm not trying to be difficult by any means, but our workload is going to be, it's hard for us to meet the needs of having a council presentation and a special meeting. You know what I mean? We're trying not to overload ourselves as well to meet your needs. So if we decide to have a special meeting for the chair and vice chair, I would maybe recommend that we move the council presentation out a little bit.
By council presentation, what do you mean?
The annual council presentation that we were just talking about.
Which
Yeah.
was supposed to happen in February, but we're putting it off.
So, but do you see what I mean? We're already time challenged, and that's going to take quite a bit of time for us to put together and work with you. So I just want to make sure we're respecting all of those items and giving them adequate attention. So we could, currently for the next agenda, we have the goals and objectives on there. Maybe we focus the next meeting on the chair and vice chair. If that's too far out, I understand, but
It seems to me we're all here now, it's on the agenda. We may not come to a conclusion today, but we can at least start the discussion.
Yeah, that's up to you guys.
Okay. Well, as long as we are, then I wanted to let the committee know that I would like to, I've been honored to be your chairman for the past 2 or 3 years. I would like to step down from the chairmanship, at least for this year, and allow someone else to assume that position. So if anyone's worried about nominating somebody else instead of me, be my guest, because I'm honored to serve on this committee. As long as council will reappoint me, but right now I'd like to step down as chairman.
Would you be willing to be vice chairman?
Yes.
So is there anyone who has any interest in being chairman?
I was asked if I would consider, and I would like to get my feet wet here a little bit longer before I commit to that.
Good move, Nick. I was the same way when I first came on. Yeah, I thought I better get absorbed in this for a year before I did.
I'd like to nominate Mr. Marston.
I would second that.
Jim, I know you expressed to me your concern about.
Well, I've got
What
some
you got?
new research projects, but I was thinking about it yesterday, and I'll do it.
Oh, wonderful.
As long as I have a backup vice chair.
You do.
Thank you.
Great.
Well, there wasn't a vote yet, so.
I'll entertain a motion to accept Mr. Marston as chairman and Mr. Burnham as vice chair.
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
So we just need to show that Mike also
Yeah, I
is
also
voting.
By
agree with that.
acclamation.
He's part of the voting process on this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with your guys' decision.
I didn't know, can you explain why? I'm not,
It's actually in the
Where I was
council
just-
resolution
that
that the
voted
ADA coordinator is part of the decision-making on the chair.
on the chair, nothing else, just that.
Well, he's the ultimate decision maker on everything.
Okay,
And
but he
can-
doesn't vote on anything else except.
Correct.
Okay, I just didn't know that. Thank you.
Well, okay. Before we adjourn, I'd like to ask Mr. Wiltshire if you have any comments, responses to what you've seen unfold before your eyes in the last couple hours?
Yeah, no, thank you for the time. This is new to me, as you guys know. I stepped into this role in January. It's been fantastic having Aurelia and Tina available because they have now a lot of experience with this and they've been very competent. I can kind of echo what Aurelia said, that I know there's been some transition on the city side, and so I kind of want to look to smooth that out. It seems like there's some process-driven confusion based on special meetings and agendas and how often we need to meet. I also agree with Aurelia that we're not fully made of time. All we want to do is be available for you guys and address your concerns in an efficient way. I don't yet see a specific need. I don't feel that we're missing agenda items. It hasn't been proven to me that that's the case, so I'd push towards addressing our missed agenda items and getting them on the next agenda without creating a whole bunch of additional meetings if they're unnecessary. Yeah, no, it's great to hear from all of you, and just know that I'm gonna wholeheartedly look for your guys' input to direct the funds and means that the city does have, which is not infinite, towards projects that make sense for the ADA community.
With the report to council, is that something we'll see, or how will we know about it?
It'll be a public document. Anything that goes to council is public. And so I've got to get my head around on what that's going to look like, but I'm assuming it's going to be a summary of our agenda items coupled with a project list of what the city has completed in that specific year with regards to ADA projects.
Will we have an opportunity to comment before it's finalized and presented?
I don't see an issue with that.
No, I was even would there be support for bringing that to the next meeting to present here and then taking it to council? Or are we in a big hurry to take it prior to the next meeting? We can accommodate either. I just want to make sure that you guys get the ability to comment and have input.
I would support the opportunity to review before submitting.
Yeah.
And is the next meeting okay?
But is it okay, is it legal to just send it to us and have us, like a draft report, and have us look at it and send
Yes,
it back to you?
because that would just
And
be,
put
you
it
would just
back?
be communicating with us. You would not be communicating
Right.
amongst yourselves.
That we wouldn't have to waste another meeting.
If you prefer that way, absolutely.
Well, that's just my thought.
Okay.
What do you guys think?
Well, I like that as a way to at least get started again with the annual, an annual report.
Yeah.
Which way, which idea? The handing out the presentation or bringing it here?
Handing it out rather than
Okay.
waiting until May.
Okay, perfect.
Mike, I had a question for you also. You know, Martha and Karen and I met with Jim back in October, November, and we went over some specifics on the goals list. Would you be amenable to that committee meeting with you between now and the May meeting to tweak that some more?
Yeah, I'd be more than amenable. That would help me dramatically. I think the only hardship would be you guys doing the meeting again. So, but it would be helpful
Okay.
for me, and I would appreciate that.
Okay, as chairman of that ad hoc committee, I can arrange a time with you and
Let's do that as soon as possible.
yeah, and Jim, you, well, let's see, no, I guess if you joined us, we'd have a quorum, so that would violate the Brown Act. But Martha and Karen and I can meet with you.
Yeah, I'm available as soon as next week or anytime in the near future.
Okay, good.
And I just want to offer, if you have any questions on this whole new, I'm sure you're not very familiar with disabled people and their needs and stuff. If you have any questions, I'm certainly available, and I think I'll volunteer most of my people here who would have time to answer something. I've found out, I used to test a lot of disabled people, so I knew a whole bunch of them. And it came to light that most people are afraid to ask disabled people, how do you do this? How do you do that? Because they don't want to act like they're studying it.
It feels awkward.
So they ignore disabled people instead of talking to them. So many people
Right.
don't say to
That's
Bob,
number one.
how the heck do you cross the street with no vision? Okay? But he's a wonderful walker, but no one asks him. They don't ask Ken how he understands this and that, right?
Right.
So just, I think I speak for the whole group, feel free to ask people what their so-called personal questions on what it's like to have a certain disability.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, and a little bit on my background. I'm an engineer by background, so I'm a project guy. I am fairly familiar with the code and requirements, but the most important thing out of this meeting is code is fantastic, but it's also great to get an idea on what's practically appreciated.
The reason for the code is often missing with the engineering side. You don't understand why this needs to be that way. Why a certain height is important. Why a certain color is important.
Yeah, no, I look forward to working with you guys.
And Mike, in your role now, will you be, how much interaction will you have, say, with the appeals board when an issue comes up regarding accessibility? For example, this whole Sandman Inn project that was up recently. Were you conversant with that at all?
No.
Okay.
Bob, I just wanted to address that real quick. We, as a courtesy, brought information back on the Sandman decision, but that was not actually in this committee's purview.
Okay. Anything else?
Can I say something that's not really related, but it's very interesting? I've just discovered a third business in town who has an accessible entrance for wheelchairs, but they keep it locked. And there's no doorbell. And I don't know, I know you guys don't have the answer to this, I'll have to talk to the building department. But it just is pretty weird that here's a big accessible entrance and you can't get anyone. You pound on it. So is it really an accessible entrance? No, right? So anyway, just a thought that, have you seen this kind of stuff?
Yeah.
Okay.
Ken has a comment. The Cabrillo corridor, there's a light where you stop and you're supposed to stop for pedestrian crossing and there's a light, and then there's another light down a ways, and you can see the next one, and then you see all these lights and who's crossing or who's not crossing, and there's no illumination. So when it's dark, you can't see people that are trying to cross, even though the warning signs are there. So I may need some more illumination for when people are crossing, and it's quite dark. So street lights.
A specific intersection?
This is where?
Yeah, what's the location?
It's State Street to
Castillo, I'm guessing.
Or the other way.
Is he talking about Cabrillo?
Yeah, along the Cabrillo corridor.
Yeah,
on the Cabrillo between
I saw it last
State
night.
and there's a crossing way between State and
Anacapa?
Castillo.
By Sambo's restaurant?
Yes, Sambo's, it's right near that, and the people cross, because there's a T intersection there, right in the center, and people have the right to cross right there, and they push, and the lights start blinking, but there's no street lights to illuminate that there's somebody crossing. For a motorist, you stop because you see the things, but you can't see anybody crossing until they're right in front of your vehicle at night. So it might be a good place for a street light, because there's nothing there.
So Mike and Leila, would this be referred to streets?
Yeah, that would be something good for that group. I know that is a really critical area, especially with the cruise ships coming in, and I know there is a lot of eyes on that street in particular. So it could be something good to discuss with streets.
Okay.
Okay.
Tina, the policeman wanted Nick and I to get his email. Can you get that to us?
Yes.
We're going to be including that in the minutes, and we'll do our best to distribute those within a week.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank
very
you for
much.
that.
I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll second the motion, but before I do, I just want to thank staff for all their help. It's really appreciated.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you guys.
And welcome aboard.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Yeah.
Opposed? Any opposed? Meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody.
Yeah, you can stay.
Well, welcome.